I never imagined my life would shatter in my own doorway. But there I stood, keys still warm in my hand from my early flight home, facing a stranger draped in my grandmother's cashmere throw, who had just ordered me to find somewhere else to stay tonight. The earthquake of betrayal trembled through me as my husband of 8 years cowered behind her, unable to meet my eyes while this woman, Jasmine, his girlfriend, smugly informed me they were planning their future in my house. My shock dissolved into something like dark amusement as I realized the catastrophic miscalculation they'd both made. This beautiful Victorian in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood wasn't just any house, and I wasn't just any betrayed wife. I was the sole owner, the landlord, and the granddaughter of the woman who had taught me that independence was the one thing no one could take from you unless you surrendered it willingly. And surrender was not in my vocabulary. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I closed the front door behind me, not with a slam as they might have expected, but with a gentle click that somehow felt more ominous. The sound of inevitability. I set my travel bag down and removed my coat, hanging it precisely on the antique coat rack my grandmother had loved. Every movement is deliberate, measured. My legal training kicked in, preparing for what would essentially be the most personal case of my life. "Let me get this straight," I said, walking past them both into my own living room. "You're asking me to leave my house? The house that's been in my family for 3 generations?" Jasmine's triumphant expression faltered slightly. She glanced at Michael, who had gone pale. "Olivia," Michael started, using that placating tone he'd perfected during our marriage, "we can talk about this reasonably. I know this is a shock. Is it?" I interrupted, settling onto the armchair that had been my reading spot since we moved in. "Because your late nights at the office, your weekend emergencies, and the mysterious charges at the waterfront hotel downtown weren't exactly subtle." "Clues, Michael." Jasmine's eyes widened, darting between Michael and me. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to be so well-informed or composed. Perhaps she'd anticipated tears, hysterics, the stereotypical reaction of a betrayed wife. But I had suspected something, was wrong for months, and suspicion had given way to investigation, and investigation to certainty. What neither of them knew was that I had already consulted with Diana Martinez, the best divorce attorney in Seattle, 2 weeks ago. What neither of them knew was that I had already documented every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every lie. What neither of them knew was that beneath my calm exterior, I wasn't breaking. I was strategizing. "Michael, perhaps you should have mentioned whose name is actually on the deed to this house," I said, my voice carrying a chill that seemed to lower the temperature in the room. Michael ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. "Olivia, be reasonable. We've built a life here together. 8 years of marriage counts for something." "It counted for everything until you decided it didn't," I replied evenly. "And you," I turned to Jasmine, "might want to ask your boyfriend about the prenuptial agreement he signed. The one that specifically addresses infidelity." Michael's face drained of what little color remained. The prenup had been my father's idea, a precaution I'd reluctantly agreed to when we married. Michael had been an up-and-coming architect then, full of ambition, but with more dreams than achievements. I had already established my career as a corporate attorney with a promising track record. The inequality in our financial positions had made the prenup seem reasonable, though I'd never imagined we'd actually need it. "Michael?" Jasmine's voice had lost its confidence, taking on a questioning tone. "What is she talking about?" "She's trying to intimidate us," Michael said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Olivia always does this, uses legal jargon to make people feel small." I almost felt sorry for him at that moment. Almost. The desperation in his attempt to maintain control over a situation rapidly spiraling away from him was palpable. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my charcoal pencil skirt. "I'll be staying at the Four Seasons tonight," I announced, picking up my bag again. "Not because you have any right to ask me to leave, but because I prefer not to sleep under the same roof as either of you right now. I expect you both to be gone by noon tomorrow. After that, I'll have the locks changed." "You can't just throw me out of my own home." Michael's voice rose, panic replacing his earlier discomfort. "It's not your home, Michael. It never was. You've been living here because I allowed it." I pulled out my phone and pulled up the property records I'd downloaded that morning, a precaution born of growing suspicion. I turned the screen toward them. "The deed is in my name only. Always has been. My grandmother left it to me before we even met." Jasmine adjusted the cashmere throw around her shoulders, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Michael told me this was your shared home, that you bought it together after you got married. Did he also tell you he's been living off my family's money for the better part of a decade?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret them. "Or that his architecture firm has been struggling for the past 2 years? Or that the credit cards he's been using to wine and dine you are in my name?" Michael's face contorted with anger and shame. "That's not fair, Olivia. I've contributed. My designs—" "Your designs are brilliant, Michael. They always have been. But they haven't paid our mortgage in 4 years. I softened my tone slightly, not out of kindness but precision. I wanted the facts to land clearly, without the distortion of emotion. "I've supported your dream because I believed in you. I've paid the bills, funded your firm through the rough patches, and never once complained because that's what partners do. What I didn't sign up for was financing your affair." The room fell silent. Outside, rain began to patter against the windows, Seattle's perpetual companion providing a melancholy soundtrack to the dissolution of my marriage. "I think I should go," Jasmine finally said, clutching the throw tighter around herself. "I think you should," I agreed. "And you might want to take another look at Michael before you go. Really look at who he is, not who he's pretended to be." She hesitated, then disappeared upstairs, presumably to gather her clothes. Michael and I stood, in strained silence until she was out of earshot. "You didn't have to humiliate me in front of her," he said quietly. "And you didn't have to bring her into my grandmother's house," I countered. "The house where we talked about raising children someday. The house I trusted you to respect." Michael looked genuinely contrite for the first time since I'd walked in. "Olivia, I know I've made a terrible mistake. But 8 years? That has to mean something. We can work through this." I studied the man I had once thought I'd grow old with. The man whose dreams I had supported, whose failures I had cushioned, whose successes I had celebrated as if they were my own. I searched for the person I had fallen in love with and found only a stranger wearing his face. "Did you love her?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could contain it. Michael hesitated, which was answer enough. "How long?" He looked down at his hands. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of coming home late and kissing me with lips that had been on her. Of sharing my bed while dreaming of another woman. Of I love yous that had become nothing more than a habit. Tomorrow. "Noon," I repeated, and turned toward the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. "And Michael, call your parents. You'll need a place to stay." I walked out into the rain, not bothering with an umbrella. The cool drops mingled with the tears I finally allowed to fall, now that there was no one to witness them. I got into my car, the sensible Volvo I'd chosen for its safety features, imagining future carpools and family road trips that now would never happen, and pulled out my phone. Diana answered on the second ring. "Olivia, is everything all right? It's nearly midnight." "It's happening," I said simply. I caught them together, in my house. Diana didn't waste time with platitudes or expressions of sympathy. It was one of the reasons I'd chosen her. Document. Everything. Take photos of any evidence before you leave the property. Forward me those credit card statements we discussed. And Olivia, stay somewhere else tonight. Hotel, a friend's place, doesn't matter. Just give yourself some space to process. Already on my way to the Four Seasons. Good. I'll have preliminary paperwork ready by morning. We'll meet at 9 a.m. I ended the call and started the car, the familiar purr of the engine oddly comforting amid the chaos of the evening. As I drove, through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, I found myself mapping out the days ahead with the same methodical precision I applied to complex legal cases. First, secure the house. Change the locks, update security codes, document any damage or missing items. Second, protect my finances. I'd already started separating our accounts when my suspicions grew serious, but there were still joint credit cards to cancel, automatic, payments to redirect. Third, notify my firm. As a senior partner at Williams & Knox, I'd need to manage this personal crisis without letting it affect my professional obligations. A delicate balance, but one I was determined to maintain. The hotel. Lobby was quiet when I arrived, just a few late-night travelers checking in. The concierge recognized me from previous corporate events and didn't ask questions about my arrival at such a late hour without a reservation or luggage beyond my carry-on. Mrs. Parker, we have a Deluxe King available on the 18th floor. Will that suffice? I hesitated at the use of my married name, a small reminder of everything that was changing. Ms. Knox, I corrected gently. And yes, that would be perfect. Thank you. The room was immaculate, impersonal in the way only luxury hotel rooms can be, a blank canvas absent of memories or associations. I set my bag down and stood at the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. 8 years of marriage, gone in an instant. Or had it been eroding slowly day by day without my noticing? Had I been so focused on supporting Michael's dreams, on building my own career, that I'd missed the warning signs? The gradual distancing, the diminishing intimacy, the increasing secrecy? My phone buzzed with a text. Michael, can we please talk about this? I made a mistake, but I don't want to lose you. Or our home. Our home. The presumption in those two words crystallized everything. Michael had never fully understood that the house was more than just real estate to me. It was my heritage, my connection to the grandmother who had raised me after my parents died. The woman who had taught me the value of independence, of self-reliance, of never allowing yourself to be at the mercy of someone else's choices. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began composing an email to my assistant, outlining the tasks that would need attention while I took a few personal days. I was halfway through when another text arrived, not from Michael this time, but from Jasmine. I'm sorry about tonight. Michael told me you were separated. I never would have gotten involved if I knew he was lying. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The apology felt hollow, too little too late. If she was truly sorry, why text rather than leaving? Why continue the affair once she'd discovered the truth? But the rational part of my brain acknowledged that my anger was misdirected. Jasmine hadn't made vows to me. Michael had. I set the phone aside without responding to either of them and continued with my email. When it was sent, I showered, washing away the physical traces of the day, the airplane recycled air, the taxi exhaust, the lingering scent of betrayal that seemed to cling to my skin. Wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, I finally allowed myself to fully feel the emotions I'd been holding at bay. Not just the pain of betrayal, though that was sharp and insistent, but also a surprising sense of clarity. For years, I'd been making accommodations for Michael. Financially, emotionally, professionally, I'd accepted his extended absences as dedication to his work. I'd shouldered the burden of our expenses as an investment in our future. I'd postponed my own desires, including the children we'd once planned to have, to support his need to establish himself first. And what had it gotten me? A husband who brought another woman into my grandmother's house, who had the audacity to ask me to leave so they could have privacy. As I slipped between the cool, impersonal sheets of the hotel bed, a strange calm settled over me. Tomorrow would bring complications, difficult conversations, the beginning of legal proceedings that would formally end my marriage. But it would also bring the first day of a life reclaimed. A life where I made choices based solely on my own needs and desires. For nearly a decade, I'd been Olivia Parker, Michael's wife, playing a supporting role in the story of his career, his ambitions, his life. It was time to remember who I was before. Olivia Knox, a woman who had never needed anyone to complete her story. As sleep finally claimed me in the early hours of the morning, my last conscious thought was not of what I had lost, but of what I was about to reclaim. The Four Seasons signature scent, subtle notes of cedar and bergamot, greeted me as I emerged from a fitful sleep. For a disorienting moment, I forgot where I was and why. Then reality crashed back. My husband's betrayal, a stranger in my grandmother's house, the collapse of my marriage in a single devastating instant. My phone showed 6:30 a.m., along with 16 missed calls and 23 text messages from Michael. I ignored them all and called room service instead. If I was going to face Diana Martinez at 9 a.m. and dismantle my marriage, I would do it properly caffeinated and fed. While waiting for my breakfast, I opened my laptop and pulled up the document I'd been compiling for weeks, a detailed accounting of our finances. Michael might have forgotten whose name was on the deed to our house, but I hadn't forgotten how our financial lives had become increasingly entangled over 8 years of marriage. When we first met, I was already established at Williams & Knox, having made junior partner at 32, the youngest in the firm's history. Michael was talented but struggling, his architectural vision too modern for Seattle's more conservative firms. I'd believed in him, in his brilliance. I still did. That was the cruelest part of all this. I hadn't stopped believing in his talent, even as I'd started doubting his fidelity. I had bankrolled his independent firm 4 years ago, after he'd been passed over for partnership at Westlake Architects. I'd seen it as an investment in our shared future. Now I scrolled through the numbers dispassionately. $175,000 initial capital, another $230,000 in operating expenses over the years, not to mention the mortgage and household expenses I'd increasingly taken on as his business struggled to find stable footing. A soft knock announced my breakfast. I welcomed the interruption, setting aside the spreadsheets of financial entanglement to focus on the simple pleasure of perfectly scrambled eggs and fresh-pressed coffee. As I ate, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror across the room. Looked surprisingly normal, my auburn hair slightly tousled from sleep, my green eyes clear despite the minimal rest. I'd expected to see some visible evidence of the seismic shift in my life, some mark that distinguished the woman who had left for a business trip to San Francisco, believing in her marriage, from the woman who had returned to find it was a fiction. But there was nothing, just the same face I'd always had, now viewing the world through a sharply altered lens. At precisely 8:45 a.m., I entered the sleek downtown offices of Martinez Legal Group. The receptionist, recognizing me, smiled sympathetically. Word traveled fast in Seattle's legal community. "Ms. Martinez is expecting you, Ms. Knox," she said, my maiden name flowing naturally from her lips. I wondered if Diana had instructed her to use it, another small kindness from a woman known more for her ruthless effectiveness than her bedside manner. Diana rose from behind her desk as I entered, her crisp white shirt a stark contrast against her deep umber skin. At 52, she had the confident posture of a woman who had never lost a significant case and never expected to. "Olivia," she said simply, gesturing to a chair, "you look better than expected." "I'm compartmentalizing," I replied, settling into the leather seat. I'll fall apart later when the legal work is done. Diana's lips curved slightly. That's why you're my favorite client. Now tell me exactly what happened last night. Spare no details. I recounted the scene clinically, Jasmine's presumption, Michael's cowardice, the revelation about the house ownership. Diana took notes in her precise handwriting, occasionally asking for clarification. And you're certain you want to proceed with the divorce? No chance of reconciliation? She asked, when I'd finished. The question surprised me. You know what happened. Why would you ask that? Diana set down her pen. Because I've been doing this for 25 years, Olivia. And in my experience, even the most clear-cut betrayals sometimes end in reconciliation. People forgive the unforgivable every day. I considered her words, searching my heart for any desire to salvage what Michael and I had built. But all I found was a cold certainty that whatever we'd had was irreparably broken. He brought another woman into my grandmother's house, I said finally. The house where Louise Knox raised me after my parents died. The house she left to me specifically because she wanted me to always have a place that was mine, that couldn't be taken away. I met Diana's gaze steadily. I can forgive many things, but not that. Not the desecration of my heritage. Diana nodded, satisfied. Then we proceed as planned. I've drafted the initial filing. She slid a folder across the desk. The prenup simplifies things considerably, particularly the infidelity clause. If you can document the affair, I have credit card statements, hotel receipts, and now eyewitness testimony. My own, I interjected. Plus whatever evidence was on his phone, though I expect he's deleted that by now. Doesn't matter. We can subpoena phone records if needed. Diana tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the desk. The house isn't even a question since it predates the marriage and remained solely in your name. But we should discuss the firm. Michael's architectural firm, Parker Designs, was legally more complex. While I had provided the capital, we had structured it as a loan from me to the business, with Michael as sole proprietor. It had been a tax strategy, one that now created complications. I don't want his business, I said firmly. I want repayment of my investment, with interest as specified in our agreement, but I have no desire to destroy what he's built. Diana raised an eyebrow. That's generous, considering the circumstances. It's practical. His firm has potential, despite its current struggles. If he can stabilize it, he can repay me. If I force liquidation now, I'll recover pennies on the dollar. I shrugged slightly. Besides, I don't want to be connected to him through a business relationship any longer than necessary. Fair enough. We'll structure the settlement accordingly. Diana made another note. What about today? Have you been back to the house? I shook my head. I told them to be out by noon. I plan to return after this meeting. Don't go alone, Diana advised. Not for legal reasons. You're well within your rights. But for emotional support. These initial confrontations can be more difficult than anticipated. I thought about who I could ask. Most of our friends were shared, and I wasn't ready for the questions, the inevitable taking of sides. But there was one person who had never, particularly liked Michael, who had seen through his charm to the self-absorption beneath. My cousin Audrey, I decided. She lives nearby and works from home. She can meet me there. Diana nodded approval. Perfect. Now, let's go through these documents line by line before you sign anything. For the next hour, we methodically reviewed the divorce filing, the financial disclosures, and the proposed settlement terms. Diana's thoroughness was legendary, her attention to detail unmatched. It was why I had chosen her, despite her reputation for charging fees that made even fellow attorneys wince. By the time I left her office, I had signed the initial paperwork and had a clear roadmap for the process ahead. 3 to 6 months, Diana estimated, given the prenup and the clear evidence of infidelity. A lifetime, it felt like, to have Michael legally excised from my life. Outside, Seattle's persistent drizzle had given way to weak sunshine. a rare enough occurrence in February to feel like a small blessing. I texted Audrey, who responded immediately with a string of expletives about Michael, followed by confirmation that she'd meet me at the house in 30 minutes. I stopped at a hardware store en route and purchased new locks, high-security deadbolts. That would replace the existing ones. An unnecessary precaution, perhaps, given that I planned to change the security codes as well, but there was something symbolically powerful about physically changing the barriers between my home and the outside world. As I pulled into the driveway of my Queen Anne Victorian, I noted with grim satisfaction that Michael's Tesla was gone. Whether he had respected my deadline or simply couldn't face me again, I didn't know or care. What mattered was reclaiming my space. Audrey's Mini Cooper was already parked on the street, and my cousin leaned against it, her tall frame and signature platinum pixie cut unmistakable even from a distance. She straightened as I approached, her usually playful expression replaced by fierce protectiveness. "I brought reinforcements," she said by way of greeting, holding up a bottle of expensive scotch in one hand and a toolbox in the other. Liquid courage and practical solutions, the dual approach. For the first time since discovering Michael and Jasmine in my home, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. Audrey had that effect, her practical Midwestern sensibility cutting through drama with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "The scotch will have to wait until after we're done changing locks," I said, managing a small smile. "But I appreciate the thought." "Oh, the scotch is non-negotiable," Audrey replied, following me up the front steps. "But I concede it can wait until after the manual labor." She hesitated as we reached the door. "Are you sure they're gone? Because I'm fully prepared to unleash a lifetime of repressed Midwestern rage if that home-wrecking harpy is still here." "Michael's car is gone," I said, inserting my key into the lock. "That's all I know." The house was silent as we entered, no sign of recent occupation except for a coffee mug left on the kitchen counter. Not one of mine, I noted with a flash of irritation. Jasmine had apparently made herself quite comfortable. "I'll check upstairs," Audrey volunteered, already moving toward the staircase. "You scout the main floor." I moved methodically through the rooms I knew so intimately. The living room with its original fireplace, the dining room where Michael and I had hosted countless dinner parties, the small sunroom my grandmother had added in the 1980s that served as my reading nook. Everything looked normal, undisturbed, yet somehow foreign, as if the knowledge of what had transpired here had altered the very molecules of the space. "All clear upstairs," Audrey called, descending the stairs with her characteristic brisk efficiency. "Though you might want to change the sheets in the guest room." She made a face. "Actually, burn them. And possibly the whole bed." The implication that Michael and Jasmine had used our guest room rather than our marital bed was small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Some boundaries, at least, had been respected. "Let's start with the locks," I said, pushing aside the mental image Audrey's words had evoked. "Front door first, then back." Working together, we made quick work of replacing the deadbolts. Audrey, whose renovation hobby had equipped her with surprising handywoman skills, handled the installation while I changed the codes on the electronic security system and the garage door opener. "He's been calling nonstop," Audrey mentioned casually, as she tested the new front door lock. "My phone, probably realized you're not answering yours." "What did he say?" I asked, surprised to find I was curious despite myself. That he made a terrible mistake. That he wants to explain. That Jasmine meant nothing. Audrey rolled her eyes. The usual cheater's litany of excuses. "I told him to direct all communication to your attorney and blocked his number." I smiled gratefully. "Thank you for handling that. I'm not ready to talk to him yet." "You don't have to talk to him at all if you don't want to," Audrey reminded me, pocketing the new keys. "Diana Martinez is perfectly capable of communicating necessary information." We moved through the house, systematically reclaiming it, gathering Michael's essential items into boxes for his eventual retrieval, removing photographs from walls and surfaces, changing passwords on the smart home system. It felt like exercising. A ghost, eliminating the traces of his presence one by one. In my bedroom, I opened his closet and stared at the neatly hung suits, the color-coordinated casual wear, the shoes lined up with mathematical precision. 8 years of shared life, reduced to fabric and leather that would soon be removed from my home. "You okay?" Audrey asked softly from the doorway. "I thought I'd feel more," I admitted, running my hand along the sleeve of his favorite blazer. "Sadness, rage, something. But all I feel is empty." "The emotions will come," she assured me. "Right now, you're in survival mode. Your brain is protecting you. Maybe." I closed the closet door decisively. "But right now, I need practicality more than emotion. Can you help me make a list of everything that needs to be done? Financial accounts to separate, services to update, people to notify." Audrey nodded, following me downstairs to the kitchen where we spread out with legal pads and laptops. For the next hour, we created a comprehensive inventory of the practical steps required to disentangle my life from Michael's. A roadmap to independence that felt oddly liberating, despite the circumstances that necessitated it. We were deeply engrossed in this task when a key scraped ineffectually in the front door lock, followed by frustrated rattling of the handle. "Olivia?" Michael's voice called through the door. "The key isn't working. Let me in. We need to talk." Audrey shot me, a questioning look. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Wait here," I told her, moving to the front door but not opening it. "The locks have been changed," I called through the door. "As I said they would be." "This is ridiculous." Michael's voice was tight with frustration. "I live here. You can't just lock me out of my own house." "It's not your house, Michael. We've established that. If you need to retrieve more of your belongings, contact Diana Martinez to arrange a supervised visit." There was a pause. Then, "You've already contacted a divorce attorney?" "Jesus, Olivia, it hasn't even been 24 hours. Can we just talk like adults?" The audacity nearly took my breath away. Like adults? Was it adult to bring your girlfriend into my grandmother's house? Was it adult to ask me to leave so you could have privacy with her? "I made a mistake," he said, his voice dropping to that persuasive tone he used with difficult clients. "A terrible, inexcusable mistake. But 8 years of marriage deserves more than a knee-jerk reaction. We should at least try to work through this." I leaned my forehead against the door, suddenly exhausted by his predictable script. The cheater's playbook: minimize, deflect, appeal to history, paint the betrayed spouse as unreasonable for not immediately forgiving. "Michael," I said finally, "the prenup you signed specifies that infidelity constitutes grounds for divorce with specific financial penalties. You knew this when you chose to have an affair. You knew this when you brought Jasmine into my house. All of your current problems, legal, financial, residential, are direct consequences of your choices. I'm not interested in a reconciliation. I'm not interested in working things out. I want you to respect the process we're now legally bound to and stop trying to circumvent it by showing up at my door." Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of the rain that had started again, pattering against the porch roof. "So that's it?" he finally said, hurt and anger mingling in his voice. 8 years, and you're just done? One mistake and you throw everything away? It wasn't one mistake, Michael. It was a 6-month affair, according to Jasmine. It was hundreds of individual decisions to lie, to betray, to disrespect everything we built. I straightened, stepping back from the door. "And I'm not the one who threw everything away. You did that when you decided our vows were optional." I could hear him breathing on the other side of the door, and could almost visualize the way his jaw would be working as he struggled to formulate a response that might sway me. "What about my things?" he finally asked, pragmatism evidently winning out over emotion. I need my clothes, my work files. As I said, contact Diana. She'll coordinate with your attorney. I assume you've retained one by now, to arrange access. I paused, then added with deliberate calm, and Michael, if you come here unannounced again, I'll file a restraining order. This is my property, and you're no longer welcome on it without prior arrangement. I turned away without waiting for his response, finding Audrey standing in the hallway, the scotch now open in her hand. I think now's the time for this, she said, extending the bottle toward me. I accepted it with a grateful nod and took a direct swig, the peaty liquid burning a path down my throat. It wasn't my usual approach to fine scotch, but these weren't usual circumstances. He'll be back, Audrey predicted, reclaiming the bottle for her own substantial sip. Men like Michael don't accept rejection easily. Men like Michael aren't used to consequences, I corrected, moving back toward the kitchen. But he'll learn. As the afternoon progressed into evening, Audrey and I continued our methodical reclamation of my space, fueled by scotch and righteous indignation. We ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, a place Michael had always complained was too spicy, and ate it directly from the containers at the kitchen island. "Where's this Jasmine work?" Audrey asked around a mouthful of pad thai. "You should send her a glitter bomb," I chuckled despite myself. "She's a design consultant at Emerald Interiors and no glitter bombs. I'm taking the high road." "The high road is overrated," Audrey grumbled. "At least tell me you're going to soak him financially in the divorce." I twirled noodles around my fork, considering. I'm going to hold him to the exact terms of the prenup. No more, no less. I don't want his money, Audrey. I don't want anything from him except to be free of this marriage with my dignity and property intact. Audrey studied me over the rim of her water glass. "You know what I've always admired about you, Liv? Your ability to stay true to yourself, even when it would be so much easier to become someone else. Someone bitter or vengeful." She set down her glass. I'd be plotting elaborate revenge schemes involving his credit score and possibly his testicles. I smiled wryly. The night is young, I might still get there. But as I spoke the words, I knew they weren't true. The anger would come, was already simmering beneath the surface of my practiced calm. But it wouldn't consume me. I wouldn't let it define my response to this betrayal. As night fell, Audrey reluctantly prepared to leave, extracting a promise that I would call if I needed anything, day or night. "Are you sure you want to stay here alone?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. "My guest room is always open." I shook my head. I need to do this, sleep in my own house, reclaim my space. If I leave now, it might be harder to come back. After she left, I moved through the quiet rooms, turning off lights, checking locks, completing the familiar bedtime ritual that now felt anything but familiar. In the bedroom, I hesitated before the king-sized bed Michael and I had shared. Then, impulsively stripped it completely, replacing the sheets and comforter with fresh linens from the closet. Small acts of reclamation, one after another. As I finally slid between the cool sheets, my phone buzzed with a text. I expected Michael, making one last attempt at communication before the night ended. Instead, it was a message from William Knox, my father's older brother and the current managing partner at Williams & Knox. "Olivia, heard about the situation with Michael. If you need anything, legal support, time off, someone to have a quiet word with him, let me know. Family stands together." The message, so typical of my uncle's understated but unwavering support, brought the first tears I'd allowed myself since discovering Michael's betrayal. They weren't tears of sadness or even anger, but of gratitude that amid the wreckage of my marriage, I still had a foundation of family who would stand with me without question. I texted back a simple thank you, promising to call him the next day, then set my phone aside and stared up at the ceiling. The house creaked and settled around me, its familiar noises both comforting and disorienting in the new context of solitude. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, returning to work, facing colleagues who might have already heard rumors, continuing the practical dismantling of my married life. But tonight, in the sanctuary of my grandmother's house, my house, I had taken the first steps toward whatever came next. You always told me that independence was the greatest gift a woman could give herself, Grandma, I whispered into the darkness. I think I finally understand what you meant. As sleep claimed me, I felt a curious lightness replacing the day's heaviness. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps the first tendrils of possibility unfurling in the space where certainty had crumbled. Morning arrived with unforgiving clarity. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close the blinds. On, a rare, brilliantly clear Seattle day that seemed at odds with the chaos of my personal life. For a moment, I lay still, acclimating to this new reality. I was alone in my house, officially separated from my husband of 8 years, beginning divorce proceedings. My phone showed it was 6:15 a.m., early, but not unusually so for me. What was unusual were the notifications. 3 emails from Diana with documents requiring my review, a text from Audrey checking in, and surprisingly, a message from Jasmine. I opened the last one with wary curiosity. Olivia, I want to apologize for my role in this situation. I truly believed Michael when he said you two were separated and divorcing. I never would have gotten involved otherwise. I've ended things with him after learning the truth. I'm deeply sorry for the pain this has caused you. I stared at the message, trying to discern its authenticity. Was this genuine remorse or an attempt to distance herself from a man whose financial situation was far less secure than she'd been led to believe? Either way, I decided, it wasn't my concern. Jasmine's moral compass, or lack thereof, was her own problem now. I left the message, unanswered, and rose to prepare for the day ahead. Today would be my first day back at Williams & Knox since discovering Michael's betrayal, and I was determined to maintain the professional composure that had defined my career. The routine was comforting. Shower, blow dry, makeup applied with practiced precision. I selected a charcoal pantsuit and emerald silk blouse, armor for the day ahead. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, I caught my reflection in the mirror and was surprised by the woman looking back at me. I had expected to see some visible change, some mark of what I'd endured, but my exterior remained intact, composed, polished, professional. Only I knew about the fissures beneath the surface. The drive downtown was mercifully quick, Seattle's notorious traffic not yet at its peak. I arrived at the imposing glass tower housing Williams & Knox with time to spare, using the extra minutes to center myself in the car. Facts, not emotions, I murmured, a mantra from my early courtroom days. Clear-eyed, not clouded. The firm's reception area was quiet when I arrived. Only a handful of early birds like myself already at their desks. I made it to my corner office without encountering anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions, closing the door with a quiet sigh of relief. The space felt unchanged. The wall of law books I rarely reference anymore but kept for tradition's sake. The photographs of my parents that had been moved from my grandmother's house after her death. The view of Elliott Bay that had sold me on this particular office when I made partner. Everything was as I'd left it 4 days ago, before my world tilted on its axis. I had barely settled at my desk when a soft knock preceded the door opening to reveal Margaret, my assistant for the past 5 years. "Welcome back," she said simply, setting a cup of coffee, prepared exactly as I liked it, on my desk. "Your 9 a.m. with Westridge Tech called to confirm, and your uncle would like to see you when you have a moment." No mention of Michael, no probing questions or sympathetic looks. Just business as usual. I could have kissed her for her discretion. "Thank you, Margaret. Please tell William I can see him now if he's available." She nodded and withdrew, closing the door silently behind her. I took a grateful sip of the coffee, appreciating the small normalcy in a life suddenly bereft of normal. William Knox appeared 10 minutes later, his tall frame filling the doorway before he closed it behind him. At 62, my father's older brother remained imposing, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of commanding presence that made juries and opposing counsel alike pay careful attention. "Olivia," he said simply, taking the seat opposite my desk. "How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Diana Martinez is handling the divorce. The prenup should make it relatively straightforward." William nodded, unsurprised that I'd chosen to focus on the practical aspects rather than the emotional fallout. It was the Knox way, after all. "Good. Martinez is excellent. Expensive, but worth every penny." He paused, studying me with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated countless witnesses over his 4-decade career. "Your father would be proud of how you're handling this." The unexpected reference to my father caught me off guard. Robert Knox had been gone for 15 years, killed alongside my mother in the boating accident that had left me an orphan at 23. William rarely spoke of his younger brother, the pain of his loss still evident in the tightening around his eyes whenever Robert's name was mentioned. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means a lot. Robert always said you had the best of both of them, his strategic mind and Caroline's unflinching backbone." William's lips curved in a rare smile. He was right. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the shared understanding of family requiring no additional words. "I've adjusted your caseload," William finally said, returning to the practical. "Transferred the Meridian merger to Thompson's team. You'll keep Westridge and Harborview, but I've brought in Jenkins to assist with the preliminary work." I started to protest. I'd been lead counsel on the Meridian merger for months, and it was potentially the firm's biggest deal of the year. But William held up a hand, halting my objection. "This isn't about your capabilities, Olivia. It's about bandwidth. Divorce, even an easy one, consumes mental and emotional resources. The Meridian timeline coincides with when this will likely be at its messiest. I'm not doubting you, I'm supporting you." Put that way, I couldn't argue. And truthfully, the thought of having one less major responsibility during this time was quietly relieving. "I understand. Thank you for thinking of it." William stood. Our brief personal interlude clearly concluded. "One more thing," he said, pausing at the door. "The managing partners have discussed it, and we'd like you to consider taking your father's name off the door." I blinked, momentarily confused. "What do you mean?" "Williams and Knox has had a Knox at the helm since my father founded it with Jonathan Williams in 1952. Your father took my father's place, and I took Robert's. There needs to be a Knox to follow me." He regarded me steadily. "You're next in line, Olivia. It's time to start thinking about it." With that bombshell delivered, he departed, leaving me staring at the closed door in stunned silence. Managing partner? It was a possibility I'd considered in some distant theoretical future, certainly not now, with William still at the peak of his capabilities and my own life in turmoil. Yet as the initial shock faded, I felt a spark of something like anticipation ignite within me. Managing partner at one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, it was everything I'd worked toward, the pinnacle of the career path I'd set for myself long before I'd met Michael. Michael. How would he react to this news? He'd always been supportive of my career in public, proud to introduce me as a partner at Williams & Knox. But in private, he'd often made small comments that revealed his discomfort with my success, especially as his own career languished in comparison. Would he see this as the final proof that I had outgrown him? Or would he try to claim some credit for my achievement, as he had with past promotions? I shook my head, dispelling the thoughts. Michael's opinions no longer mattered. His reactions, his feelings, his pride or lack thereof, none of it was my concern anymore. That part of my life was over. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of client calls and document reviews. I approached each task with hyper-focus, grateful for the distraction of complex legal problems that required my full attention. My colleagues, likely warned by William, or simply perceptive enough to read the room, maintained a respectful distance, limiting interactions to necessary professional matters. At lunch, I opted to eat at my desk rather than risk the firm's dining room, where questions or sympathetic overtures might be harder to avoid. I was midway through a salad when my phone lit up with Michael's name. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something, curiosity perhaps, or a masochistic need for closure, made me answer instead. "What do you want, Michael?" I asked, keeping my voice low despite the closed door. "Olivia, thank you for picking up." He sounded surprised, almost hopeful. "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday." "I'm aware. I've been busy." "With the divorce papers? Yes." Bitterness crept into his tone. "Diana Martinez, Olivia? Really? She's the most expensive divorce attorney in Seattle." "She's the best," I corrected. "And given that you brought your girlfriend into my grandmother's house and tried to make me leave, I'd say the expense is justified." He sighed heavily. "I know I handled things badly, terribly. But you have to understand, I was planning to tell you. The timing never seemed right." The absurdity of this statement momentarily robbed me of speech, as if there were a right time to tell your spouse you were having an affair. "Why are you calling, Michael?" I finally asked. "If it's about your belongings, Diana has already communicated with Patricia Winters about a supervised retrieval time." "Patricia Winters? I haven't hired Patricia Winters." He sounded confused. "Then who is your attorney?" I asked, equally puzzled. Diana had mentioned having received correspondence from Winters just that morning. There was a slight pause. "I haven't retained anyone yet. I was hoping we could handle this without attorneys, without making it adversarial." Understanding dawned, bringing with it a fresh wave of indignation. "Let me get this straight. You want me to dismiss my attorney and negotiate directly with you, despite the fact that you've been unfaithful, lied repeatedly, and tried to make me leave my own house?" "When you put it like that—" "How else would I put it?" I interrupted, my composure finally cracking. "Those are the facts, Michael. And if Patricia Winters isn't representing you, then who contacted Diana this morning about scheduling a time for you to collect your things from the house?" Another pause, longer this time. "Probably Jasmine. She said she'd try to help sort things out." I closed my eyes, absorbing this fresh betrayal. Not only was Jasmine presumptuous enough to contact me directly with her hollow apology, but she was now apparently pretending to be a legal representative to gain access to my home. "Let me be absolutely clear," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Neither you nor Jasmine will set foot in my house without proper legal representation and supervision. Any further attempts to circumvent this process will result in additional legal action. Is that understood?" "Olivia, please." "Is that understood?" He sighed again, this time in defeat. "Yes, it's understood." "Good. Now, if there's nothing else, I have work to do." "Just one more thing," he said quickly, before I could hang up. "Your name is still on the business accounts for Parker Designs. I can't access the operating funds without your signature. We have payroll coming up for the staff." "Of course. It always came back to money with Michael." "I'll have Diana draft an amendment to the operating agreement," I cut in. "You'll have access to the necessary funds for legitimate business expenses, with oversight provisions until the divorce is finalized." "Oversight?" His voice rose slightly. "It's my company, Olivia. A company funded entirely by my investment," I reminded him. "A company whose operating expenses I've been subsidizing for years. Be grateful I'm not calling in the loans immediately, which I would be well within my rights to do given the circumstances." The silence that followed told me he hadn't considered this possibility, that in his rush to secure access to the business accounts, he'd inadvertently reminded me of the considerable financial leverage I held. "Thank you," he finally said, his tone carefully modulated. "I appreciate your reasonableness about the business." "It's not reasonable, Michael. It's practical. I want to recover my investment, not destroy what you've built." After ending the call, I sat still for a moment, allowing the tension to drain from my shoulders. Then I picked up my desk phone and called Diana. "Jasmine Cortez is impersonating legal counsel," I informed her without preamble when she answered. "She contacted your office this morning pretending to represent Michael." Diana's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of colorful curses. "That's a serious ethical violation, potentially criminal, depending on exactly what she claimed." "I want it addressed immediately," I said. "And I want to amend the temporary arrangements for Parker Designs. Michael needs access to the operating accounts for payroll, but I want oversight until the divorce is finalized." "Consider it done," Diana replied. "And Olivia? Well handled." Many clients would be throwing glasses against walls at this point, not calmly arranging business continuity. After hanging up, I returned to my work with renewed determination, channeling my frustration into productive energy. By the time evening arrived, I had cleared my desk of pending matters, drafted a comprehensive memo for Jenkins regarding the Westridge case, and prepared fully for the next day's client meetings. As I gathered my things to leave, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Your car is waiting downstairs," she said. "And I've taken the liberty of making dinner reservations at Canley's for you and Miss Harper at 8 p.m. I looked up in surprise. Audrey had mentioned nothing about dinner plans, and Canley's was one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, not a place for casual last-minute dining. "There must be some mistake," I began, but Margaret shook her head. "No mistake. Miss Harper called this afternoon while you were in with the Westridge team." She was quite insistent. A small smile played around her lips. "Something about not letting you wallow in legal briefs and self-righteousness on your first night back." It was such a perfect Audrey sentiment that I couldn't help but laugh. "Of course she did. Thank you, Margaret." The car service, another of Audrey's arrangements evidently, delivered me home with enough time to shower and change before dinner. As I moved through the house, I was struck by how quickly it was returning to a space that felt entirely mine. Already, the absence of Michael's possessions was more comfort than wound. In the bedroom, I opened my closet and surveyed my options. For years, my wardrobe had been carefully curated for professional success. Tailored suits, modest dresses, sensible heels, even my casual wear tended toward the conservative, influenced by Michael's preference for what he called understated elegance, but what I now recognized as simply boring. On impulse, I reached for the one item that had always drawn Michael's disapproval. A red silk dress with a daringly low back, purchased on a solo trip to New York 3 years ago, and worn exactly once before being relegated to the back of the closet after Michael's subtle but persistent criticism. The fabric slid cool against my skin as I slipped it on, the color vibrant against my fair complexion. I studied my reflection in the full-length mirror, seeing not just the dress, but the woman wearing it, someone emerging from the careful constraints of a marriage that had slowly but steadily diminished her. "There you are," I murmured to my reflection, recognizing something in my eyes that had been absent for longer than I cared to admit. A spark of defiance, of self-determination. A willingness to be seen on my own terms. Canless was as elegant as its reputation promised, all understated luxury and impeccable service. Audrey was waiting at the bar when I arrived, her expression shifting from casual observation to surprised approval as she took in my appearance. "Well, well," she said, rising to greet me with a warm hug. "Look who decided to come out of hiding. The dress or me? I asked, returning her embrace. Both. She stepped back to appraise me more fully. I haven't seen that dress since you bought it. Or that look in your eyes, for that matter. What look is that? Like you're remembering who you are. She looped her arm through mine as we followed the maitre d' to our table. It's a good look on you. Our table offered a spectacular view of Lake Union, the city lights reflecting on the dark water below. As we settled in, Audrey ordered champagne without consulting me. Veuve Clicquot, my favorite. We're celebrating, she declared when I raised an eyebrow. Your first day back at work, your impending freedom from that spineless architect, and… She raised her glass as the champagne arrived. The return of the real Olivia Knox, who apparently has excellent taste in dresses when her husband isn't around to criticize her choices. I clinked my glass against hers, surprising myself with a genuine smile. To new beginnings, then. To new beginnings? She echoed. And to that absolute bombshell William dropped on you today. I nearly choked on my champagne. How did you know about that? Audrey's smile was utterly unrepentant. William called me after he left your office. He wanted me to make sure you were celebrating properly, not just burying yourself in work. Since when are you and my uncle so chummy? I demanded, torn between amusement and annoyance at their collusion. Since he realized I'm the only person who can get you to do something other than work or strategize your divorce. She shrugged unapologetically. Someone has to remind you that you're 35, not 65. And that life continues outside the hallowed halls of Williams and Knox. As the evening progressed through multiple exquisite courses, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't in months, perhaps years. Audrey had always had that effect on me, her irreverent humor and refreshing directness cutting through my tendency toward excessive seriousness. We were halfway through dessert when Audrey suddenly stiffened, her gaze fixing on something over my shoulder. Incoming, she muttered. 3 o'clock. Don't look too obvious. I turned slightly, following her gaze, and felt my stomach drop. Michael had just entered the restaurant, impeccably dressed in the charcoal suit I'd given him for his last birthday. And beside him, looking polished and professional in a navy sheath dress, was Jasmine. You have got to be kidding me, Audrey hissed. The audacity of that man. I turned back to face her, willing my expression to remain neutral despite the churning in my gut. It's a free country. He can dine wherever he chooses. At the restaurant where you had your first date? Where did he propose? Audrey's outrage was building. This isn't a coincidence, Liv. This is deliberate provocation. She was right, of course. Canlis held significant history for Michael and me. History he was now appropriating for whatever game he was playing with Jasmine. The realization brought clarity rather than pain. This wasn't about love or even attraction. This was about power, about maintaining the illusion of control even as it slipped from his grasp. Let them have their performance, I said quietly. It doesn't touch us. Audrey's eyes widened slightly at my use of us rather than me, then softened with understanding. Of course it doesn't, she agreed, reaching across to squeeze my hand. But just so you know, I fully support making a dramatic exit that happens, to take us right past their table, if you're interested. I considered the option, imagining Michael's face if I were to pass by in the red dress he'd always tried to discourage me from wearing, looking confident and composed rather than devastated. It would be satisfying, certainly, but it would also be playing into his scenario, acknowledging the game he was trying to initiate. And I was done playing Michael Parker's games. Actually, I said, lifting my champagne glass for a final sip, I think I'd prefer to leave quietly through the kitchen. Let them wait for a reaction that never comes. Audrey's slow smile was approval itself. Now that, she said appreciatively, is the Olivia Knox I remember. The kitchen exit strategy proved surprisingly enjoyable. The head chef, recognizing Audrey as a regular patron, escorted us through the gleaming stainless steel domain with theatrical courtesy, introducing us to his brigade as if we were visiting dignitaries. By the time we emerged into the cool Seattle, night through the service entrance, I was laughing genuinely for what felt like the first time in months. That, Audrey declared as we waited for the valet to bring our cars, is how you maintain the upper hand. Michael will spend the entire evening nervously anticipating an uncomfortable encounter that never materializes. Psychological warfare at its finest. I smiled, savoring the mental image of Michael growing increasingly tense as the evening progressed. I'm not sure it qualifies as warfare when I'm simply refusing to engage. Oh, but that's the beauty of it, Audrey insisted. Your non-engagement is more devastating than any confrontation could be. It says you don't consider him important enough to acknowledge. Her words resonated more deeply than perhaps she intended. For years, I'd centered Michael in my decision-making, his career needs, his social preferences, his comfort. Even my initial reaction to his betrayal had been shaped by anticipation of his responses. The decision to simply exit the restaurant without seeking his attention felt like the first truly independent choice I'd made in our entire relationship. "Thank you for tonight," I said as Audrey's car arrived first. "For getting me out of the house, for the celebration, for everything." She hugged me tightly. "This is just the beginning, Liv. The renaissance of Olivia Knox is officially underway." She pulled back, her expression turning serious. "And I meant what I said at dinner. You don't have to handle everything alone. Letting people support you isn't weakness, it's wisdom." I nodded, acknowledging the gentle rebuke for what it was. A reminder of my tendency to isolate myself within work and self-sufficiency when faced with emotional challenges. "I'll call you tomorrow," I promised as she slid into her car. "And Audrey, I'm really glad you're my family." Her smile softened. "Right back at you, counselor." The drive home was peaceful, the city lights blurring into ribbons of color as I navigated the familiar route. Inside my house, increasingly joyfully mine again, I moved through my evening routine with a lightness that had been absent for too long. The red dress went back on a hanger, but this time prominently displayed at the front of the closet, a visual reminder of reclaimed identity. As I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with an email notification from Diana. I hesitated before opening it, reluctant to re-engage with divorce matters after such a positive evening. But professional habits won out, and I clicked to read the message. It was brief and to the point. "Restraining order against Jasmine Cortez filed this afternoon. Hearing set for Monday. Also, Michael has retained counsel. Jonathan Reed from Blackwell and Reed. Interesting choice. Details tomorrow." I set down the phone, processing this development. Jonathan Reed was known in Seattle legal circles as the gentleman's divorce attorney, skilled but notably less aggressive than someone like Patricia Winters. His specialty was negotiating quiet, dignified separations for high-profile clients who wanted minimal publicity and drama. The choice revealed Michael's strategy. He was positioning himself as the reasonable party seeking an amicable resolution, in contrast to my excessive response of hiring Diana Martinez and filing restraining orders. It was manipulative but predictable. Michael had always excelled at managing perceptions, at crafting narratives that cast him in the most favorable light. I slept surprisingly well that night, waking refreshed to another clear Seattle morning. The weekend stretched before me, 2 full days without court appearances or client meetings, time I'd normally have filled with catching up on case files or handling the domestic tasks Michael somehow never got around to. Today, however, I felt no pull toward either work or household management. Instead, I found myself drawn to possibilities I hadn't considered in years. After breakfast, I called Elise Chen, an old friend from law school who had abandoned a promising legal career to open an art gallery in Pioneer Square. We'd drifted apart after my marriage, Our friendship, another casualty of Michael's subtle but persistent influence. He'd found her too bohemian, her lifestyle choices irresponsible. "Olivia Knox," she answered on the third ring, surprise evident in her voice. "To what do I owe this blast from the past?" "I was wondering if that standing invitation to your gallery's Saturday events was still open," I replied, wincing slightly at how formal I sounded even to myself. There was a pause, then, "Always. Though I admit I gave up expecting you to actually show up somewhere around year 3 of sending invitations." The gentle reproach was deserved. I'd declined so many of her invitations over the years that eventually they'd stopped coming altogether. "I'd like to rectify that," I said. "Starting today, if that's possible." "Well, you're in luck," Elise said, her tone warming. "We're hosting a special exhibition of emerging Pacific Northwest artists. Opening reception starts at 4. Very casual, very not Williams and Knox." "Perfect," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I realized I'd committed to an entirely social engagement. No professional networking, no client cultivation, just pure personal interest for the first time in recent memory. The recognition was both liberating and slightly alarming. Had I really allowed my life to become so narrowly focused on work and marriage? I spent the morning tackling a project I'd been contemplating for months, but never found time for, redesigning my home office. Under Michael's influence, it had evolved into a masculine space that mimicked his own architectural studio. Dark woods, leather furnishings, industrial lighting. It had never truly felt like mine. Armed with design magazines and a renewed sense of possibility, I began planning a transformation. Lighter woods, a glass-topped desk to replace the heavy oak monstrosity currently dominating the room, vibrant art for the walls instead of the austere black and white photography Michael had preferred. I was deep into measurements and furniture websites when my doorbell rang. Glancing at the security camera feed on my phone, I was surprised to see William Knox standing on my porch, looking uncharacteristically casual in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual impeccable suit. "This is unexpected," I said as I opened the door. William raised an eyebrow. "Should I have called first? You used to complain that I treated you too formally." "No, it's fine," I assured him, stepping back to allow him entry. "Just surprising." "I don't think you've been here since Louise's funeral," he finished quietly. 5 years now." I nodded, suddenly understanding the real reason for his visit. My grandmother's house carried memories for William, too. She had been his last connection to his brother, my father, after the accident. "Coffee?" I offered, leading him toward the kitchen. "Please." He followed, his tall frame seeming out of place in the domestic setting. William Knox belonged in courtrooms and corner offices, not sunny kitchens on Saturday mornings. As I prepared the coffee, he surveyed the space with quiet attention, noting the changes I'd already made: removal of Michael's modernist art pieces, rearrangement of furniture, the vase of fresh flowers I'd bought yesterday on a whim. "You're reclaiming the space," he observed. "Good. Louise would approve." I smiled slightly as I handed him a mug. "I was just planning to redo my office." Michael turned it into something that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine, not a functional workspace for a lawyer. William nodded. He always did have a flair for aesthetics over practicality. One of the reasons his firm struggled, I suspect. The blunt assessment of Michael's professional shortcomings was typical William, direct to the point of brutality, but never malicious, simply factual. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" I asked, guiding us to the breakfast nook overlooking the garden. William took a sip of his coffee before answering. "Two things, actually. First, a purely practical matter. The firm's annual War Charity Gala is next weekend. As a named partner, your presence is expected." I winced slightly. The gala was a major event in Seattle's legal and business circles. a night of performative philanthropy that nonetheless raised substantial funds for education initiatives. I'd always attended with Michael on my arm, the picture-perfect professional. "Couple? I'll be there," I assured him. "Solo, obviously." "Actually," William said carefully, "that's partly why I'm here. The seating arrangements are already finalized. You'd be at the head table with the other partners and their spouses." Understanding dawned. And Michael was included in that planning. William nodded. "We can rearrange things, of course, but I wanted to give you warning and options. You could attend solo, bring an alternate guest, or, if it's too soon, I can make your excuses." The offer of an out was uncharacteristically gentle coming from William, who generally regarded personal discomfort as an irrelevant factor in professional obligations. "I'll attend," I said firmly, "and I'll bring someone. But thank you for the consideration." He acknowledged this with a slight incline of his head. "The second matter is more personal. I've been going through some of Robert's old files, part of estate planning, transferring things to digital, and I found something I thought you should have." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small envelope, yellowed with age, and placed it on the table between us. My name was written on the front in my father's distinctive handwriting. "What is this?" I asked, not reaching for it immediately. "A letter," William replied, "written the day after your graduation from law school. Robert asked me to hold it for you, to give it to you when the time was right." I'll admit I'd forgotten about it until recently. I stared at the envelope, a message from a ghost. "And you think now is the right time?" William's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Robert always said you were like him, strongest when facing adversity, most yourself when challenged. I think he'd want you to have his words now, as you're rebuilding." I picked up the envelope carefully, as if it might disintegrate in my hands. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing William would understand that the brevity of my response wasn't lack of gratitude, but an attempt to maintain composure. He nodded and stood, recognizing my need for privacy with this unexpected connection to my father. "I'll see myself out. Call if you need anything, professional or personal." After he left, I sat for a long time with the unopened letter in my hands, torn between eagerness to read my father's words and fear of the emotional response they might evoke. Finally, I slipped it into the pocket of my robe, deciding to save it for evening, when I could absorb its contents without the pressure of Elise's gallery opening ahead of me. The rest of the day passed in productive activity, finalizing plans for my office redesign, ordering a few key furniture pieces for delivery the following week, and selecting a new paint color for the master bedroom that would replace the subdued taupe Michael had insisted was timeless, with a vibrant sage that made the space feel alive. By mid-afternoon, I was readying for the gallery opening, confronting another wardrobe decision that felt weightier than it should. After deliberation, I opted for dark jeans paired with a silk blouse in deep purple, casual by my usual standards but still put together, a middle ground between corporate attorney and artistic freedom. Chen Gallery was bustling when I arrived, the industrial space transformed by strategic lighting and the vibrant energy of Seattle's art scene. I spotted Elise immediately, her signature silver-streaked black bob unmistakable as she guided a group of potential buyers through the main exhibition area. She broke away when she saw me, her smile genuine if slightly wary. "You actually came." "I said I would," I replied, accepting her quick hug. "Yes, but you've said that before." There was no recrimination in her tone, just statement of fact. "What changed?" I considered deflecting with something non-committal, but our friendship, however neglected, deserved honesty. "Everything," I admitted. "Michael and I are divorcing. I'm re-evaluating a lot of choices." Elise's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. "I never liked him," she said simply. "Too controlling in that quiet way that makes a woman doubt herself." The assessment was so accurate it momentarily took my breath away. I'd never characterized Michael's influence that way, even in my own thoughts. But Elise had captured it perfectly, the subtle undermining that had gradually reshaped my life, without any single moment of overt domination. "I'm sorry I drifted away," I said. Elise shrugged, pragmatic as always. "You're here now. That's what matters." She linked her arm through mine. "Come meet some actual interesting people who create things instead of just arguing about who owns them." The next 2 hours were a revelation. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed Elise's circle: artists, writers, musicians, people who approached life from perspectives entirely different from the legal and corporate worlds I inhabited. Their conversations weren't about billable hours or precedent, but about creative process, social impact, the intersection of art and community. I found myself engaged in a fascinating discussion with a sculptor whose work incorporated reclaimed materials from demolished historical buildings, preserving fragments of Seattle's disappearing architectural heritage in new forms. His passion was infectious, his knowledge of the city's history impressive. "You should meet my friend Julian," Elise said, appearing at my elbow with fresh glasses of wine for us both. "He's doing a public installation next month using salvaged elements from the old Westlake warehouse district. Right up your alley, Aaron." The sculptor, Aaron, smiled warmly. "I'd love that. The more people working to preserve pieces of our history, the better." "Julian's a preservation architect," Elise explained to me. "Specializes in adapting historic buildings for modern use without destroying their character." A stark contrast to Michael's sleek modernism, I thought, but didn't say. Michael viewed old buildings as challenges to be overcome or facades to be maintained while gutting interiors. Preservation had never been his priority. "Sounds fascinating," I said instead. "I've always loved Seattle's architectural history." Elise's knowing smile suggested she caught the unspoken comparison. "I'll introduce you sometime. He's in Portland this weekend for a project." The evening continued pleasantly, the art genuinely engaging, the company refreshing. By the time I prepared to leave, I felt more myself than I had in years, intellectually stimulated, socially connected, present in a way that had nothing to do with professional obligation or marital expectation. "This was good," Elise said as she walked me to my car. "Don't be a stranger again, Olivia. Life's too short to spend it all in a law office." "I'm learning that," I admitted, slowly but surely. At home, I changed into comfortable clothes and made a cup of tea, settling into the window seat in my bedroom with the still unopened letter from my father. Outside, Seattle's persistent rain had returned, pattering against the glass in a soothing rhythm. Finally, I carefully opened the envelope, unfolding a single sheet of stationery embossed with the Williams and Knox letterhead. My father's handwriting, so familiar yet so long unseen, filled the page. "My dearest Olivia, today I watched you graduate with honors from my alma mater, following the path I've walked with pride for 25 years. The temptation is strong to see myself in you, your analytical mind, your determined spirit, your unwavering pursuit of justice. But that would do you a disservice, because you are entirely your own person, with gifts far beyond anything I could have contributed. You stand now at the beginning of your professional life, and if you're anything like I was at your age, you're already planning each step. Which firm, which specialty, which career milestones to target. There's value in that planning, that foresight. But if I may offer one piece of advice from further down the path, don't define yourself solely by professional achievement. Your mother reminds me daily, usually when I'm working too late, that a life narrowed to a single purpose becomes brittle, vulnerable to breaking when that purpose is threatened or changed. A life with multiple wellsprings of meaning, relationships, passions beyond work, contributions to community, becomes resilient, able to bend without breaking when challenges arise. Find those multiple sources of meaning, Olivia. Guard them. Jealousy. Don't let anyone, colleague, mentor, or partner, convince you to abandon them in service of a single definition of success. I am endlessly proud of the lawyer you're becoming. But I am more proud of the complete human being you are. Compassionate, curious, courageous in ways that have nothing to do with courtroom confidence. Whatever path you choose, know that you carry with you always the unconditional love and support of your mother and me. With boundless pride and affection, Dad, I read the letter twice more, tears blurring my vision. The timing of William's delivery was almost uncanny. My father's words speaking directly to the realizations I'd been coming to on my own, validating the instinct to reclaim aspects of myself beyond professional identity. I'm trying, Dad, I whispered to the rain-streaked window. I'm remembering how. My phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. How was the art thing? Elise says you were a hit. Also, what are you wearing to the Williams and Knox gala? We need to coordinate. I smiled, suddenly understanding what William had been suggesting earlier. Of course I would bring Audrey. Who better to face Seattle's legal elite with than someone who saw through pretense and had known me since childhood? It was wonderful, I texted back. And apparently we're attending a gala together next weekend. Hope you own something formal. Her response was immediate. I own things that would scandalize your entire firm. But I'll behave. Mostly. I set the phone aside, my father's letter still in my hand, feeling a sense of alignment I hadn't experienced in years. The professional path was clear. Partnership on my own terms, possibly managing partner in the future. But equally important were the personal connections I was rebuilding, the sense of self I was reclaiming piece by piece. The renaissance of Olivia Knox, as Audrey had called it, was indeed underway. And for the first time since finding Michael and Jasmine in my house, I felt genuinely grateful for the catalyst that had forced this necessary transformation. Sometimes, I reflected, as I carefully returned the letter to its envelope, the thing you think is breaking you is actually the thing setting you free. Monday morning brought with it the restraining order hearing against Jasmine. I arrived at the King County Courthouse 30 minutes early, dressed in what Audrey called my legal warrior outfit, a perfectly tailored navy suit that somehow managed to convey both authority and restraint. Diana was already waiting, her briefcase open as she reviewed documents one final time. Good morning, she greeted me, looking up from her papers. Sleep well? Surprisingly, yes, I replied, settling into the chair beside her. Any word on whether she'll actually show up? Diana's lips curved in a slight smile. Oh, she'll be here. Jonathan Reed called me personally yesterday to inform me that while his client, meaning Michael, has no direct involvement in this matter, Ms. Cortez will be represented by Stephen Walsh from his firm. I raised an eyebrow at this development. They're providing her with legal representation? That seems telling. Indeed, Reed made some noise about ensuring all parties receive fair treatment and preventing escalation of an unfortunate situation. But the subtext was clear enough. Diana closed her briefcase with a decisive click. Michael is protecting her. Or himself, I suggested. If Jasmine faces legal consequences for impersonating counsel, she might decide Michael was complicit. Diana nodded appreciatively. Precisely. My thinking. This isn't about chivalry, it's about damage control. The courtroom began filling as 9 a.m. approached. I recognized Stephen Walsh immediately, a junior associate from Blackwell and Reed, known for handling the firm's less prestigious cases. And beside him, looking considerably less confident than she had in my doorway that fateful night, was Jasmine Cortez. She'd dressed conservatively for court, a beige pantsuit that seemed deliberately chosen to convey seriousness and professionalism, rather than the stylish image she'd projected at Canlis. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal. The transformation was almost impressive in its calculation. Our eyes met briefly across the courtroom, hers quickly darting away when I didn't avert my gaze. It was a small victory, but one I quietly savored. The hearing itself was brief and decisively in our favor. Diana presented clear evidence of Jasmine's call to her office, including the receptionist's sworn statement that Jasmine had explicitly claimed to be representing Michael Parker in his divorce proceedings. The deception was unambiguous. Walsh attempted to portray it as a simple misunderstanding. Jasmine had merely been trying to help facilitate communication and had been unclear about proper protocols. But Judge Harrigan, a no-nonsense veteran of the family court system, was unimpressed by this explanation. "Ms. Cortez," she said, fixing Jasmine with a penetrating stare, "are you an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of Washington?" "No, Your Honor," Jasmine admitted quietly. "Are you employed in any legal capacity whatsoever?" "No, Your Honor." "Then you should have known better than to contact opposing counsel claiming to represent someone in ongoing legal proceedings." "Judge." Harrigan's tone was measured but firm. Such actions border on criminal impersonation. In the end, the temporary restraining order was granted, prohibiting Jasmine from contacting me directly, attempting to access my property, or representing herself as acting on Michael's behalf in any legal capacity. It was a clear win, though less severe than the criminal charges Diana had initially suggested might be possible. As we gathered our things to leave, I noticed Stephen Walsh speaking intently to Jasmine, whose expression had shifted from chastened to indignant. She glanced in my direction, her eyes narrowing slightly before Walsh placed a cautioning hand on her arm. "She's not happy," Diana observed as we exited the courtroom. "Good. A little legal consequence might teach her to respect boundaries." "I doubt it," I replied, thinking of the calculating transformation Jasmine had undergone for her court appearance. "She strikes me as someone who learns tactical adjustments rather than moral lessons." Diana chuckled. "That's why I like you. Olivia, your assessments are always so incisively accurate." She checked her watch. "I have another hearing at 10:30. Will you be all right?" "Perfectly fine," I assured her. "I'm headed straight to the office." After Diana departed, I made my way down the courthouse steps, the Seattle morning unusually bright for early spring. I was nearly to the street when I heard my name called. "Olivia, wait!" I turned to find Michael approaching, his expression a carefully crafted mixture of concern and restraint. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit I recognized, one I'd helped him select for important client presentations. "What are you doing here?" I asked, though the answer was obvious enough. "I wanted to make sure Jasmine had proper representation," he replied, stopping a respectful distance away. "This whole situation has gotten out of hand." "Has it?" I kept my voice level. "She impersonated legal counsel Michael. That's not a misunderstanding. It's potentially criminal." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well from our marriage. She was trying to help. She didn't understand the legal implications. She's an adult woman who made a deliberate choice to misrepresent herself. Her intentions don't change that reality. Michael's expression hardened slightly. "You didn't have to pursue a restraining order. A simple warning would have sufficed." "Would it?" I regarded him steadily. "The night I found you together, she tried to make me leave my own house. When that failed, she tried to gain access by pretending to be your attorney. Those aren't the actions of someone who respects boundaries, Michael." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed. "That night, it wasn't her idea. I told her you weren't coming home until the next day. When you showed up, she panicked, as, 'Did you?' I noted. Neither of you covered yourselves in glory." A tense silence stretched between us, the courthouse steps continuing to bustle with morning activity around our small island of marital dissolution. "I miss you," he finally said, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that had once made my heart beat faster. The house feels empty without you. The statement was so absurd I nearly laughed. The house is empty because it's not your house. Anymore, Michael. And I'm not interested in revisiting emotional territory we've already covered. Can't we at least be civil? Have a conversation that isn't through attorneys? He took a step closer, his expression earnest. 8 years together deserves more than legal documents and court appearances. I studied him, recognizing the technique. Michael had always been skilled at leveraging shared history to influence present decisions. It had worked countless times during our marriage, this appeal to sentiment over clear-eyed assessment. We had our conversation the night I found you with Jasmine, I replied evenly. Everything since then has been the logical consequence of choices you made. If you want civility, direct your communication through proper channels and respect the boundaries I've established. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You've become so cold, Olivia. This isn't you. You don't get to tell me who I am anymore, Michael. I stepped back, physically and emotionally distancing myself. And if setting clear boundaries and prioritizing my own well-being seems cold to you, that's a reflection of your expectations, not my character. I turned to leave, then paused, glancing back. By the way, the house has never felt more full of life than it does now. Funny how that works. I didn't wait for his response, continuing down the steps with a lightness that belied the weightiness of the encounter. It was the first time I'd spoken to Michael directly since the night at Canlis, and I was relieved to find the interaction affected me far less than I might have anticipated. The hurt was still there, certainly, but dulled by distance and determination. At the office, I dove into work with focused energy, the morning's legal victory providing an extra boost of motivation. Around noon, Margaret appeared in my doorway. Chen from Westridge Tech is here for your lunch meeting, she announced. I've set up in the small conference room as you requested. I gathered my files, mentally shifting gears from divorce proceedings to client needs. Jason Chen, Westridge's brilliant but demanding CFO, had been a loyal client since my early days at the firm. His company's pending acquisition of a semiconductor manufacturer involved complex regulatory issues that required careful navigation. Jason, I greeted him as I entered the conference room. Thank you for making the time. He rose from his seat, extending his hand with a genuine smile. Olivia, always a pleasure. As we settled in to review the latest regulatory hurdles, I found myself grateful for the complexity of the work. It demanded complete concentration, leaving no room for thoughts of Michael or Jasmine or restraining orders. We were deep in discussion of potential SEC concerns when Jason paused, studying me with unexpected intensity. You seem different, he observed. More present, somehow. I blinked, surprised by the personal observation from a typically business-focused client. Different how? He considered this, choosing his words with characteristic precision. In previous meetings, I always had the sense you were mentally managing multiple priorities, our business being just one of many competing concerns. Today, you're fully here. He shrugged slightly. It's refreshing. The observation was startlingly perceptive. Throughout my marriage, I had indeed operated in a state of divided attention, physically present in professional settings while mentally tracking Michael's needs, our social calendar, household management, the countless invisible responsibilities I'd shouldered to maintain our life together. I've made some changes in my personal life, I acknowledged, not elaborating further. But Westridge has always been a priority client, Jason. You know that. He nodded. Of course, but there's a difference between being a priority and being the focus. His smile returned, warming his usually serious expression. Whatever the changes, they suit you. We returned to business matters, wrapping up the meeting with clear next steps and a follow-up scheduled for the following week. As Jason prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Olivia, I hope you don't find this inappropriate, but I'd like to invite you to a dinner party my wife and I are hosting this Saturday. Small gathering, mostly tech and finance people, some arts patrons. Interesting conversation, good wine, no agenda beyond enjoyment. In the past, I would have automatically checked my mental calendar of Michael's commitments before responding. Now, I found myself simply considering whether I wanted to attend. A novel experience. "That sounds lovely," I replied. "Thank you. For the invitation." "Excellent. I'll have May send the details." He paused, then added with characteristic directness, "And if you'd prefer to bring a guest, please feel free. No pressure either way." After he left, I sat for a moment, contemplating this unexpected social invitation. Jason and his wife, May, moved in Seattle's most exclusive circles: technology innovators, venture capitalists, philanthropists with global influence. It was a world adjacent to, but distinct from, the legal and architectural spheres Michael and I had frequented. An invitation to their home represented not just a pleasant social engagement, but potentially valuable connections for Williams and Knox, the kind of high-net-worth individuals who frequently required sophisticated legal services. William would approve of the networking opportunity, I thought wryly, but more importantly, I found myself genuinely interested in the prospect of conversation beyond legal matters and divorce proceedings. The rest of the day passed productively, my calendar filled with client calls and team meetings. By evening, I felt the satisfying fatigue of meaningful work accomplished, a stark contrast to the emotional exhaustion that had characterized my final months with Michael. At home, I was greeted by the first physical manifestation of my office redesign project: delivery men carefully unloading a glass-topped desk that would replace Michael's heavy oak monstrosity. The sleek, modern piece spoke to my own aesthetic preferences rather than his, emphasizing lightness and transparency over imposing solidity. "Where would you like this, ma'am?" asked the delivery foreman. "In the home office, please." I led them through the house, experiencing a small thrill at making this decision without consultation or compromise. Once they had positioned the desk and departed, I stood in the doorway, surveying the space with satisfaction. Already it felt more mine. The heavy drapes Michael had insisted upon replaced with lighter window treatments that allowed more natural light. The dark leather chair exchanged for a more ergonomic mesh option in a vibrant teal. Small changes, perhaps insignificant in isolation, but collectively transforming the space from a masculine domain that had merely accommodated my presence to an environment that reflected my preferences and priorities. My phone chimed with a text from Elise. "Julian's back, from Portland. Dinner." "Thursday? He's curious about the lawyer who actually appreciates old buildings." I smiled, typing back, "Thursday works. Name the place." Her response came quickly. "Altura at 7. He's a food snob in the best possible way." I added the dinner to my calendar, another piece of the newly emerging pattern of my life. Professional commitments balanced by social engagements. Chosen for pleasure rather than obligation. Relationships pursued for their intrinsic value rather than their utility to Michael's career or our shared social standing. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. The security app showed Audrey on my porch, arms laden with what appeared to be garment bags. "Emergency gala preparation," she announced when I opened the door, brushing past me into the foyer. "I've narrowed my options to 3, and you need to help decide which will most appropriately scandalize your colleagues while still maintaining plausible deniability." I laughed, following her into the living room where she was already draping garment bags across my sofa. "The gala isn't until Saturday. This feels premature." "Premature?" "Olivia, we have 5 days to coordinate our attack strategy." She unzipped the first bag with dramatic flair, revealing a stunning emerald gown with a daringly low back. "This is war, and couture is our weapon of choice." "It's a charity event, not a battlefield," I protested, though I couldn't help admiring the dress. It was exactly the kind of bold statement piece Michael had always discouraged me from wearing. claiming they were trying too hard or inappropriate for a senior partner's wife. "Oh, honey," Audrey patted my cheek with mock sympathy. "Every social event where exes might encounter each other is absolutely a battlefield. The only question is whether you're armed for victory or dressed for surrender." She unzipped the second tea bag, revealing an equally striking gown in deep burgundy. "Now, my sources tell me that Michael will definitely be attending, presumably without his girlfriend, given the restraining order situation, and that he's been telling people your separation is a temporary misunderstanding that's being blown out of proportion." I stiffened at this information. "What sources? And how dare he minimize what happened?" "Margaret is a treasure and deserves a substantial holiday bonus," Audrey replied, without a hint of remorse for her inside information. "And as for Michael's narrative control efforts, you really surprised? He's always excelled at managing perceptions." She wasn't wrong. Michael had built his professional reputation on his ability to shape narratives, presenting challenging architectural concepts in ways that made clients feel innovative rather than risky, positioning controversial design choices as visionary rather than problematic. Of course he would apply those same skills to our separation. All the more reason for us to present an unambiguous counter-narrative, Audrey continued, unzipping the third garment bag to reveal a sleek black column dress, with strategic cutouts that managed to be both elegant and daring. You, thriving. You, liberated. You, moving forward without a backward glance. I studied the three options, finding myself drawn to the emerald gown despite, or perhaps because of, its boldness. If we're making a statement, we might as well be clear about it. Audrey's smile was triumphant. "The green it is. Now try it on so we can check if alterations are needed." As I slipped into the gown, feeling the luxurious fabric settle against my skin, I caught my reflection in the living room mirror. The woman looking back at me was transformed, not just by the dress, but by the growing confidence in her posture, the clarity in her eyes. "Olivia Knox, Emerald Warrior," Audrey declared, coming to stand beside me. "Michael Parker won't know what hit him." But as I studied my reflection, I realized I wasn't dressing for Michael's reaction at all. For perhaps the first time since our marriage began, my choices weren't being made with his perspective in mind, neither conforming to his preferences nor deliberately defying them. I was simply choosing what pleased me, what made me feel confident and authentic. "It's not about Michael," I said quietly. "It's about reclaiming who I've always been." Audrey's expression softened with understanding. "Even better," she said, squeezing my hand. "The most powerful statement you can make is living well without reference to him at all." Later that night, after Audrey had departed with promises to coordinate accessories and final fittings, I sat in my newly redesigned office, familiarizing myself with the feel of the glass desk beneath my fingers. On its pristine surface rested two items that represented the parallel paths I was navigating: Diana's latest divorce filing update and Jason Chen's dinner party invitation, elegantly printed on heavy cardstock. Endings and beginnings, I thought. Dissolution and creation. The simultaneous processes that were reshaping my life into something new. Something that honored the woman I had been before Michael while incorporating the wisdom gained during and after our marriage. The path ahead was not yet fully clear, but for the first time since finding Jasmine in my doorway, I felt genuinely curious about where it might lead. Not just resigned to a new reality, but actively interested in exploring its possibilities. "Multiple wellsprings of meaning," I murmured, echoing my father's letter. The professional foundation was secure and expanding. The personal reconnections were underway. What other dimensions might emerge, given time and attention? The question felt like an invitation rather than a challenge, an opening rather than an obligation. I closed Diana's file and picked up Jason's invitation, running my fingers over the embossed lettering. Saturday evening would bring new people, new conversations, new perspectives into my reclaimed life, and I found myself genuinely looking forward to the expansion. 6 months after the night Jasmine tried to kick me out of my own house, I stood in the doorway of my newly renovated home, office savoring the transformation. Gone were all traces of Michael's influence, the heavy furniture, the dark color scheme, the oppressive window treatments that had blocked natural light. In their place was a space entirely my own, bright, efficient, and designed for both productivity and comfort. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Like this room, my life had undergone a complete renovation, stripped back to its foundation and rebuilt according to my own specifications rather than someone else's. "Ms. Knox?" Margaret's voice came through my phone speaker. "Mr. Reed is on. Line 1 about the final settlement agreement." "Thank you, Margaret. I'll take it." I settled into my chair, centered and prepared. Jonathan Reed's smooth, professional tone filled the line. "Olivia, I've reviewed the final terms with Michael. He's prepared to sign as is. No last-minute negotiations. No further attempts to reduce the loan repayment schedule." I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Reed's sigh was barely audible. "Michael has come to accept the reality of his situation. The terms are fair, as we both know." What Reed didn't say, but what we both understood, was that Michael had finally exhausted his options. His attempts to renegotiate, to leverage emotional appeals, to create sympathetic narratives among our social circles, had all failed. The prenuptial agreement was ironclad, my documentation meticulous, and my resolve unshakable. "We'll have the signed papers to Diana by the end of day," Reed concluded. "Congratulations on your efficient handling of a difficult situation." After ending the call, I sat for a moment, absorbing the reality that my marriage was officially ending, not with dramatic confrontation, but with signatures on legal documents. The process that had begun with such theatrical betrayal was concluding with bureaucratic formality. My phone lit up with a text from Audrey. "Champagne tonight to celebrate Freedom Day?" I smiled, typing back. "Absolutely. Bring it to Julian's exhibition. I'll meet you there at 7 Julian, Elise's preservation architect friend, who had become something more than a friend to me over the past few months. Our relationship had developed, gradually, built on shared interests and genuine connection, rather than convenience or societal expectation. Unlike Michael, Julian respected my independence, valued my career, and understood that partnership meant supporting each other's growth rather than one person diminishing to accommodate the other. The Williams and Knox Charity Gala 3 months. Ago had marked a turning point. I'd arrived in Audrey's emerald gown, radiating confidence and independence. Michael had been there as predicted, his attempt at a dignified solo appearance undermined by his visible shock when he saw me. Throughout the evening, I'd felt his eyes following me as I moved through the crowd, engaged in animated conversations with colleagues and clients, laughed genuinely at William's rare attempts at humor. When Michael had finally approached, his carefully rehearsed speech about reconciliation had faltered in the face of my evident transformation. "You look happy," he'd said, confusion evident in his voice. "I am," I'd replied simply. "Genuinely happy." He'd searched my face, perhaps looking for signs of pretense or performance. Finding none, his expression had shifted to something like loss, not just of me as his wife, but of the narrative he'd constructed about our separation. "I made a terrible mistake," he'd admitted quietly. "Yes," I'd agreed, without malice or satisfaction. But it led me exactly where I needed to be. That evening had liberated me from the last lingering thread of attachment to Michael and our marriage. Not because of any dramatic confrontation or public victory, but because I'd finally recognized the fundamental truth. Losing Michael wasn't the tragedy I'd initially perceived it to be. It was the catalyst for reclaiming myself. In the month since, my life had expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined during my marriage. The partnership track at Williams and Knox had accelerated, with William openly grooming me for eventual leadership. My social circle had grown beyond the limited boundaries Michael had subtly enforced, now including artists, preservationists, community advocates, people whose perspectives enriched my understanding of the city I'd lived in for years, but never fully experienced. And Julian had entered my life with his passionate commitment to preserving Seattle's architectural heritage, his quiet intelligence, and his profound respect for my independence. At 5:30, I left the office and drove home to change for the exhibition. Julian's project, a multimedia presentation documenting the history and salvation of several iconic Seattle buildings, was opening at Elise's gallery tonight. It represented months of work he'd shared with me in pieces, seeking my perspective, not because he needed validation, but because he valued my insight. As I dressed in a vintage-inspired outfit that complemented the exhibition's historical theme, I thought about Jasmine. According to William's connections in the architecture world, she had moved to Portland after the restraining order, unable to rebuild her professional reputation in Seattle after the scandal. Michael's once promising firm had downsized dramatically, shifting to smaller residential projects as the commercial clients drifted away. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, only a detached acknowledgement of consequences naturally flowing from choices. My focus remained firmly on my own path forward rather than their journey backward. The gallery was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Elise greeted me with a warm hug, whispering, "He's nervous about your opinion. Go easy on him." Found Julian by the central display, explaining the structural challenges of retrofitting the old Sorrento Hotel to a fascinated group of patrons. He looked up as I approached, his face brightening. "You made it," he said, excusing himself from the group. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied as he kissed my cheek. "The exhibition looks amazing." Later, as Audrey arrived with the promised champagne and our small circle gathered to celebrate both Julian's successful opening and my finalized divorce, I found myself reflecting on the strange geometry of life, how losing what I thought I wanted had led directly to discovering what I actually needed. "A toast," Audrey declared, raising her glass. "To Olivia Knox, who turned betrayal into a renaissance and reminded us all that sometimes the thing you think is breaking you is actually the thing setting you free." As our glasses clinked together, I caught Julian's warm gaze over the rim of my champagne flute. "To new beginnings," he added softly. "And to knowing who truly owns the house," I replied with a smile, understanding now that the most important ownership wasn't of physical property, but of my reclaimed life. A house I'd rebuilt from the foundation up, designed according to my own blueprint, and filled with people who respected its boundaries and celebrated its beauty. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.